Hello, BookTube. Welcome back to my 2024 library tour. I'm continuing with science fiction and fantasy. This is part 5 of science fiction and fantasy, The Attack of the Cimmerian. However, before we get to Conan and Robert E. Howard, I have to deal with Frank Herbert and Arrakis. I have the first 4 books in the Dune series on this shelf, starting with Dune. Dune is a classic of science fiction. It's probably one of the greatest science fiction novels ever, and I have issues with it. I have. I. So, Dune is a space opera. It's an epic story told, it's an epic story set thousands of years in the future in a galactic empire. The House of Atreides has elicited the jealousy of the Emperor of the known universe, and to encompass Duke Leto Atreides' doom, the Emperor has ordered the Atreides to forfeit their fief of Caladan for the planet Arrakis, which is the source of a spice called melange, which has a number of mutagenic properties that allow for certain humans to mutate and perform functions that otherwise would be done by banned artificial intelligences. The House of Harkonnen has for decades controlled Arrakis, and they are longtime enemies of the Atreides. So the plan is that at a certain point, the Harkonnens will militarily return to Arrakis to reclaim it and destroy the Atreides. And to help the Harkonnens along, the Emperor will provide some military forces of his own on the down low. Unfortunately for everybody involved and for about 61 billion people in the decade and a half after Paul Atreides um, takes over, Paul and his mother survive the destruction of House Atreides and flee to people known as the Fremen, who exist outside of the imperial control. And Paul and his mother take over the Fremen and launch a rebellion that eventually goes into a galactic empire-wide revolution. So from that description, my feelings for the book are largely negative. However, I guess maybe because of its greatness or for whatever reason, I feel like I have to like it, or I at least should like it. And I have for decades now tried to force myself to, and it's just not working. So anyway, I will probably talk a lot more about Dune later this week because for this weekly reads, upcoming weekly reads, because Dune is the subject of a booktube event here in this month of June 2004 called Dune in June. A few years ago, there was a booktube event, another Dune-centered booktube event in which participants read the whole of Dune for the last 6 months of the year. Although I think it kind of petered out after God Emperor. But I did participate, and it did not go well at all for me. So I have Dune Messiah, which is basically at the end of Paul Muad'Dib's reign as emperor, and I really don't like it. And I also don't like the sequel about his children, Children of Dune. Now, I will say I did not particularly hate God Emperor of Dune, which is the about the downfall of Paul Atreides is almost as evil or as I mean, well, I think in this case, Leto II is clearly indulging in his evil, but um, the son of Paul Atreides, who has turned into a human sandworm hybrid and has basically enacted a thousands of year reign of terror on humanity for reasons that probably aren't really actually all that much reasons, but anyway, enough about Dune. Let's move on to another book that I do not know why is still in my library, and that is The Ingenious by Darius Hinks. This is a new weird novel about a city that can travel through realities and pick bits of those realities into itself. And it's about a group of people who, I think they're from different realities, who come together as a gang and try to take the city or something. It's been a while since I read it, and I regret having read it because it is terrible. And somehow it's been a tick in my collection ever since. But hopefully, this next purge, it will go. The next book is one that I got from my cousin. This is Tales of Terror, edited by Alfred Hitchcock, or at least whoever Hitchcock paid to edit it for him. Excuse me. I think this book might do well for a horror mayhem or some other horror related booktube event, which I may or may not participate in. I don't know. Depends on my mood that particular month. So I don't know if I'm going to go ahead and purge it soonish or wait a bit and then purge it later if I don't like it. So now we come to Robert E. Howard, who is most famous for his creation Conan the Cimmerian or Conan the Barbarian. However, before I get to Conan, I do have another book by Robert E. Howard, The Black Stranger and Other American Tales. So this is a collection of American-inspired and American-set stories by Robert E. Howard. It includes one Conan story, largely because the story is inspired by the American colonial experience. And I think one of the stories' antecedents was more set in colonial America or somewhere in the Americas. But it also includes Black Canaan and Pigeons from Hell and a few others. And now we come to Conan. I have the 3-volume Del Rey collection of Conan short stories. So this is The Coming of Conan the Cimmerian, the first book in the trilogy, or the 3, and also the one with the most short stories in it. So how the Del Rey series works is that they are inserted, I think, in the order of when Howard wrote them, I think, or publication. Although this one does have a lot more extraneous materials at the back. And it's also probably my favorite of the 3. Although the other 2 do have some really good stories in them as well. So the second one is The Bloody Crown of Conan. And finally, The Conquering Sword of Conan. I've often thought about, particularly when I was more, my enjoyment of science fiction fantasy was still with me. I had often thought about trying to add more of the Del Rey, Robert E. Howard collection to my collection, but I never did. Because there are a number of the other characters that he created have their own volumes, as well as certain themes are also included. But I don't have them. Next is a book by Tanya Huff, The Fire's Stone, which I don't quite know why I have. I've had it for a number of years, and I've never gotten around to reading it or giving it a try chapter. So I either need to do that, or it needs to go at the next purging. The next 3 books are by Cameron Hurley, the first 2 of which are part of a trilogy, and the third is a standalone space opera, or at least I think it's a standalone space opera. I haven't really been following science fiction and fantasy for a number of years now, so I don't quite know who's publishing or who's not. And the one science fiction channel that I had been still subscribed to on BookTube, he largely focuses on new debuts and new releases and stuff like that. And he doesn't always touch on series that are a bit more, or writers who are more established. But anyway, so the first book by Cameron Hurley I have is The Mirror Empire, which is book 1 in the Worldbreaker saga. So this is about a brutal fantasy world that is invaded by a just as brutal fantasy world. So it's basically taking the idea of the mirror universe from Star Trek, where the versions of yourself in the other universe are twisted. In Star Trek's case, it's basically the peaceful United Federation of Planets is replaced by the more tyrannic Terran Empire. And the characters are far more cartoonishly evil. They are cartoonishly evil. So I read The Mirror Empire and I didn't like it. But for some reason, and this is a recurring theme with my science fiction and fantasy collection, I picked up Empire Ascended, which is the second book in the trilogy. Fortunately, I never did pick up the third book because, yeah, I don't know if I ever got to Mirror Ascended or not. But, yeah. And so the standalone space opera of hers I have is The Stars Are Legion, which is set in a weird sort of artificial spaceship solar system where each node of this super starship are worlds within worlds. And I didn't like it much. Just really didn't do anything for me. So the next 2 books are by Marlon James. They are the first 2 books in the Dark Star trilogy, which is African and perhaps Caribbean, but certainly African-inspired sword and sorcery. I know it's been described as epic fantasy or grimdark. It is grimdark. It is very grimdark. But I don't think the stakes are high enough for it to really be considered epic fantasy. It is very much sword and sorcery. So first up is Black Leopard, Red Wolf, which is about. So it's a story told by a character called Tracker, who is the Red Wolf of the title. He was involved with a shapeshifter named Leopard, who can turn himself into a leopard. The two, long after they've broken up, are part of a group of people searching for a missing boy. He's been kidnapped by a monster. The other half of the narrative is of Tracker's pursuit of vengeance against this boy and the relatives of his captors who slaughtered him, I mean, not him, but his husband and the children that they'd taken in and were raising as their own. I have struggled with Black Leopard Red Wolf. I think it's a situation where I want to like it, but I just don't. And I did pick up the sequel, Moonwitch Spider King, which is, I think, how the Dark Souls trilogy works. Is it's largely the same story. It's just different characters are telling it. So it's sort of like Rashomon, that Japanese movie from several decades ago. And I haven't gotten to Moonlit Spider King. Um, Next up is The Vanished Birds by Simon Jimenez. This is a space opera that I don't recall much about. I read it a few years ago for Space Opera September, and I don't think I liked it much. I don't remember the plot, but I remember that I didn't particularly like it. I wish some things had been done differently. I think maybe different characters had been focused on more than others. And finally, to end this shelf, I have some wuxia, which is a not Japanese, Chinese martial arts fantasy. I have The Legend of the Condor Heroes in 4 volumes by Jin Yang. So this is A Hero Born. So The Legend of the Condor Heroes is the first novel in a trilogy of novels. Although in English translation, it would be, I guess, a 12-part series, since each of the 3 novels is divided into 4 volumes. So, the Legend of the Condor Hero series is a historical fiction. It's set in the late 12th century and early 13th century. It's about 2 young men, Guo Jing and Yang Kang, whose fathers were martial brothers. And refugees from the northern Song dynasty after its fall to the Jurchen Jin dynasty. One day they meet a monk from the Quanzhen sect, and the monk basically solidifies the relationship between the fetuses, our main characters, who are at this point at the beginning of the series, or the novel, fetuses. And so their fathers decide that if the children are of the same gender, they would be blood siblings. And if they were of the opposite gender, they would be betrothed. Unfortunately, shortly after the monk departs, and before both women, both of their mothers, go into labor, the village is attacked by a corrupt Song official and Jurchen force, led by a young prince who has fallen in love with Yang Kang's mother. So Yang Kang's mother is abducted and taken to the Jurchen capital as this prince's consort, and the prince takes Yang Kang as his own son. Meanwhile, Guo Jing's mother flees eventually to Mongolia, where they're taken in by Genghis Khan, or Temujin, who would become Genghis Khan. And this sort of sets the stage for these 2 young men to have a very complicated relationship with each other and with the martial world of this time period. So yeah, so I have, of course, the first volume is A Hero Born. The second volume is A Bond Undone. The third volume is A Snake Lies Waiting. And the fourth volume is A Heart Divided. I have thought about picking up the rest of the trilogy. I think the second volume, or the second novel in the trilogy, is currently being translated into English. I don't know exactly how many volumes are out now, but I think in a way the impetus to collect this, the others have largely faded. I'm not as interested in picking up wuxia as I was when these four were coming out. Although I do still have some other Jin Yong novels, which I will get to tomorrow with part 6 of science fiction and fantasy. So until then, thank you, BookTube. Have a great afternoon and stay safe.